Greetings. This is the one you've known as Jesus the Christ. When you do examine your thoughts, you discover that they have a dim view of life, of yourself, and of others. The view from the vantage point of the ego is not only fearful, distrustful, and competitive, but one of scarcity and lack. Everywhere the ego looks, it finds lack. When you look out at the world through the ego's eyes, you see and feel that something is missing, in you, in others, in life, and in your experience. You are not enough, others are not enough, life is not enough, and you don't have enough. This sense of lack and of never having enough permeates the egoic state of consciousness. The ego is a programmed, ongoing sense of lack, which imagines lack where there is none. This programmed feeling of lack is one of the reasons people drink, do drugs, overeat, and try to escape reality in other ways. They're trying to escape the ego's painful, illusory reality, and who can blame them? They're trying to escape the sense of not being or having enough by filling the imaginary void within themselves with alcohol, drugs, food, sex, and material things. The trouble is, imaginary voids cannot be filled because they're imaginary. This egoic sense of lack creates a feeling of having a problem that needs to be fixed, which the ego is glad to offer advice about. The thoughts in your mind send you here and there, trying to fix a problem that only exists in your mind. The fact that other people's minds might agree that you have a problem doesn't make an imaginary problem real, but their agreement does make imaginary problems seem real. The perception of a problem and desires that stem from that problem, as well as other egoic desires, drive people's activities and make the world as you know it what it is. Everyone is busy trying to fix their perceived problems and trying to get what they believe they lack, and therefore what they believe they need to be safe and happy. This sense of lack drives the greed that has been so damaging to many and to the earth. When you're no longer in the egoic state of consciousness, and the ego is no longer driving you, life naturally unfolds. Part of this unfolding is that so-called problems become resolved and needs and desires get met. And if they don't, you discover that you have the inner and outer resources to deal with that. If you don't take on the ego's view of reality, life will still happen, you will still do things, and you will be safe and okay. In fact, if you stop seeing reality through the eyes of the ego, you'll stop feeling unsafe and not okay, and you'll start feeling genuinely happy and at peace. Once you've dropped out of the egoic state of consciousness, you experience security, okayness, peace, love, joy, and the insight and wisdom you need to move safely, effectively, and happily in the world. You don't turn to the voice in your head to define you, define your problems, solve those problems, or steer you toward happiness. From your natural state of being, the experience is one of addressing whatever needs addressing moment to moment, of life flowing and unfolding organically, and of life naturally taking care of itself. The idea that life takes care of itself sounds absurd to the ego. If this sounds absurd to you, and even if it doesn't, this might be a good place to stop a moment and ask yourself what your mind's objections are to this idea. What arguments or reservations does the voice in your head have when you hear that life is trustworthy and supportive, rather than untrustworthy and unsupportive, as your ego supposes? One of the most common reactions the ego has to the idea that life is trustworthy and supportive is to metaphorically or not so metaphorically get angry and stomp off. The ego doesn't want to investigate the veracity of its beliefs. It tends to attack and belittle the person who suggests that the ego's viewpoint is a lie. This is a defense mechanism which helps keep the ego in place. Egos don't question themselves. No real self-examination goes on in the egoic state of consciousness. Just, I believe it, therefore it's true. This is how the illusory reality is held in place. Another response on the part of the ego to the idea that life is trustworthy and supportive might be to list all the ways that life does not seem trustworthy and supportive. People are starving. People are being shot to death over drugs. The economy is in collapse. Terrorists are trying to get us. Whole species are dying off. The environment is polluted. There are no jobs. The game is rigged against the little guy. You could die any time. The list goes on, without acknowledging that so many of the things that make life so nightmarish are created by believing what the ego believes. The ego believes there's not enough, so it takes more for itself than it needs. The ego is afraid, so it grabs for power and abuses it. The ego judges people who are different as bad or inferior, and uses that as justification for killing or mistreating them. The ego makes the bottom line, money, more important than the well-being, health, and future of human beings and the planet. The ego's selfishness, egocentricity, and belief in scarcity are behind all manner of tragedy and horror on earth. In reality, people get sick, they get old, they get injured, and they die, just like every living thing. But this doesn't make life unsupportive or untrustworthy. This is just the way life is on earth. The ego doesn't like death, but there can't be life without death. Death makes room for new life. Reality also gives life, replenishes it when it's been destroyed, and provides what's needed for life to thrive. Reality is bounteous, plentiful, unstoppably alive, and ever new. Reality provides everything you need to exist. The proof of this is that you exist. Reality is also changeable, unpredictable, and unknowable. But this also does not make reality cruel, unfair, harsh, or even scary or untrustworthy, as the ego concludes. The ego's conclusions are incorrect, an illusion. These conclusions create an inner climate of distrust, fear, anger, powerlessness, and hatred, which manifests in reality in ugly ways and is then mirrored back. Then the ego's belief that life is cruel, harsh, scary, untrustworthy, and unfair becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In this way, the ego's illusory reality is created and reinforced. The truth is that reality is completely trustworthy in its changeableness, unpredictability, and mysteriousness. You can always count on reality changing, and changing unpredictably much of the time. Reality is not personally persecuting you by being the way it is. The way it is just the way of life. There's nothing inherently untrustworthy about change or about not being able to know what's going to happen. Reality only seems untrustworthy if you equate unpredictability with being untrustworthy. But that is a misunderstanding. Life is trustworthy and unpredictable. But because the ego doesn't like the way life is, the ego believes life is untrustworthy and cruel. Like a child, the ego throws a tantrum because life is not the way the ego wants it to be. Life shouldn't be this way. Things shouldn't change. People shouldn't die. Life is cruel because it's not the way I want it to be. The person who's afraid or angry with life, who doesn't trust it and experiences it as cruel, harsh, and unfair, is overlooking all the ways that life is supportive. How many times have you been down to your last dollar when all of a sudden something happened to help you out? How many times have you wondered what you would do next when an opportunity or idea suddenly arose out of nowhere? How many times have you met just the person you needed to meet, or found just the book you needed to read? Everyone's life is full of amazing stories, even seeming miracles, in which life brought something unexpectedly wonderful and exactly what was needed. When you look for such occasions, you will find them, and many people do. These people are happy. They believe in life. They believe they are partners, co-creators with something greater than themselves, which is helping shape their life. Life itself is a miracle, and the intelligence behind life brings you everything you need and more. If life is bringing you something you do not want, then that is also what you need. You have to learn to want even that, accept even that, in order to gain from that experience and discover the gift in it. Limitation is a gift. Challenges are a gift. Limitation and challenges hone and shape you and make you stronger. Other people harming you can even be a gift if you don't allow such acts to make you bitter or broken. Even so, most of the hurt and harm in the world is the result of the egoic state of consciousness. When that state of consciousness is no longer the predominant one on this planet, much of the hurt and harm will disappear, and what will remain is an experience of unadulterated reality. Thank you for being here. I am with you always.